The woman who raised me vanished without a word. No note.
No surt cas.
No reason. Just silence and secrets. But when I returned to my family home to find out what happened, I discovered something even more disturbing. She had been leaving me letters. For years.
Dozens of them.
Hidden in a place someone didn't want me to find. Now I can't shake the feeling that her disappearance wasn't just an accident. It was planned. And my family might know exactly why. Before we begin, if you've ever felt like someone in your family was hiding something, hit the like button.
Subscribe.
This is one story they never wanted told. Let's begin. I hadn't been home in nearly 4 years. The truth is, I'd avoided it. The sprawling old house on Hawthorne Hill had always felt more like a monument than a home. Too many silent rooms, too many whispered conversations behind closed doors. But when the call came last Thursday, my avoidance collapsed under the weight of 2 chilling words. She's missing. Marta, the woman who practically raised me, who combed my hair before school, who sat beside me when I cried after nightmares, who knew what kind of tea calmed my stomach when I was sick. Marta, our housekeeper, but she was more than that. So much more. She had vanished. The rain started as my rental car turned onto the long driveway, the tires crunching over gravel slick with wet leaves. The house rose in the distance like a forgotten castle, gray stone, ivy-covered, its windows darkened by time and silence. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My reflection in the rear-view mirror looked tired. Older. I wasn't the girl who had left 4 years ago, angry and unwilling to pretend the family wasn't broken beneath its glossy exterior. I stepped out, suitcase in hand, and climbed the porch steps. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in her cashmere cardigan, every inch composed, her face a porcelain mask. Only her eyes betrayed something brittle beneath the surface. "Claire," she said stiffly. "You're late." I stepped inside, swallowing 1,000 things I wanted to say. The house smelled the same, a strange mix of lemon polish, old books, and something floral I could never quite identify. But something else lingered now. An absence. I put my things in the guest room. Marta's old quarters had been converted long ago, and joined my parents in the study, where the fire burned low and my father poured scotch like it was any ordinary evening. "She's probably just had enough," he said after a long sip. Walked out. "People do that, you know." "She wouldn't," I said, voice sharper than I intended. "She didn't even take her purse. Her medication's still here. Her coat." My mother sighed, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "We've contacted the police. They're treating it as a voluntary disappearance for now." There was no sign of a struggle. I glanced around the room. The same oil paintings, the same grandfather clock ticking solemnly in the corner. Everything was too untouched. Like no one wanted to disturb the illusion. I looked at my mother. "When did you last see her?" 3 days ago, she replied. "She made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, said good night, and that was it." "And she didn't say anything strange?" "Nothing that felt off." She hesitated. "She's been quieter. But Marta's always been private." I caught the shift in her tone, that clipped, dismissive edge. That was my mother's way of burying things she didn't want to confront. "She wasn't just your housekeeper," I said. "She was family to me." That made her flinch. Just slightly. But I saw it. That night, I lay awake in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Rain tapped steadily against the window. I couldn't shake the image of Marta's soft hands buttoning my coat in 2nd grade, her quiet humming as she made breakfast, the way she used to smile with just her eyes when she thought no one was looking. I got up around midnight, pulled on a sweater, and wandered the halls with a flashlight. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown into someone who no longer felt like she belonged. I found myself standing outside Marta's old room, the one tucked into the back corner of the east wing, past the library and laundry hall. The door was closed. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was cold, undisturbed. The bed was still made, but there was dust on the windowsill, and her nightstand drawers had been rifled through, sloppily. I moved to the small desk under the window. Her knitting needles were still in a bowl, the half-finished scarf stiff from neglect. A photo sat beside it, me, age 7, sitting in Marta's lap. We were laughing. My throat tightened. Then I noticed something strange, a faint scratch along the floor near the wardrobe. I crouched down and saw scuff marks, like something heavy had been dragged or moved recently. My heart quickened. I reached for the wardrobe handle and pulled it open. Empty. But something wasn't right. The back panel, it had a slight gap at the edge. I pressed gently. It creaked and shifted. There was a hidden compartment. Inside, a small, weathered box. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were letters.
Dozens of them.
All addressed to me. Some dating back more than a decade. None of which I had ever received. Each envelope was sealed in Marta's careful handwriting. And on top, one envelope, freshly dated, just 1 week ago. My name, written in her handwriting.
Claire.
For when you're ready. I sat there on the floor, the box in my lap, my pulse thundering in my ears. Something terrible had happened here. And someone didn't want me to know what Marta had to say. But I was done looking away. I didn't sleep. Not after finding that box. Not after seeing Marta's handwriting again. Deliberate, elegant, unmistakable. Each sealed letter was a time capsule, frozen in ink and silence. She had been writing to me for years. But someone had made sure I never saw any of it. That meant someone had been intercepting them. Someone in this house. Morning crept in slowly, dull and gray, the kind of light that made everything feel colder. I stood at the window of my old bedroom, watching fog drift across the garden like breath from something unseen. The trees barely moved. The world held its breath. I tucked the box beneath the loose floorboard under the bed, the same one where I used to hide snacks and diary pages as a kid. It still creaked. Downstairs, the house was too quiet. My parents had always kept to rigid morning routines. Breakfast at 8. Mail at 8:15. Coffee by 8:30. Marta used to prepare it all, wordlessly moving through the kitchen like clockwork. Now it was just silence. I found my father in the sunroom, half asleep in his recliner with a folded newspaper resting on his chest. His reading glasses dangled from one hand, the other still wrapped around a half-empty mug of coffee. When I stepped in, he blinked and straightened. "You're up early," he said. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you know Marta was writing to me?" His brow furrowed. "What?" "She wrote letters."
Dozens of them.
"For years." His face went blank. Then careful. "I didn't know anything about that." "She kept them hidden," I added. "They were in a compartment behind her wardrobe. Someone clearly didn't want me to read them." He set down his coffee. "Claire, this isn't the time to go down rabbit holes. Marta was private. Maybe she didn't send them for a reason. Or maybe someone made sure she couldn't." His jaw tightened. "You're jumping to conclusions." I stared at him. "Am I?" He looked away. I walked through the house for hours that day, watching the light shift through old curtains and filter onto rugs worn thin by memory. I ran my hand along the banister I used to slide down as a kid. Every creak, every framed photograph felt suspicious now, like the house itself was hiding something. I paused at the door to Marta's room again. Even though I'd already searched it, something kept pulling me back. This time, I checked under the mattress behind the dresser, inside the light fixtures. In the closet, I noticed a strange discoloration on the floorboards, a faint dark stain. It looked old, but unsettling. That's when I noticed the hallway, the one that led to the back pantry and laundry rooms, had a section where the wallpaper was peeling. Just slightly. Just enough to reveal something beneath it. A seam. I pressed my hand to the wall. Hollow. I followed the line down to the floor, tracing it with my fingers until it disappeared beneath a bookshelf. A built-in. I walked back to the living room where my mother sat reading in silence, a cup of tea untouched beside her. "Did you know there's a hidden space behind the laundry hallway?" She didn't look up. "This house is over 100 years old. I'm sure there are plenty of strange architectural quirks." Why didn't Marta ever mention it? She was hired help, Claire. She wasn't here to explore the house. I clenched my fists. Stop calling her that. She lived here longer than I've been alive. My mother finally met my eyes. "You're getting emotional again. I know you and Marta had a bond, but don't let nostalgia cloud your judgment. Is that why someone intercepted her letters?" Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something sharp behind the calm. But she said nothing. That night, I waited until the house fell asleep. Then I returned to the hallway. I brought a screwdriver, a flashlight, and gloves. It took effort, but I managed to loosen the edge of the baseboard behind the shelf. The panel gave way with a soft pop. A stale gust of air brushed my face, air that hadn't moved in years. There was a narrow crawl space behind the wall.
No lights.
Just wooden planks, dust, and the sharp scent of mold. I squeezed inside. At first, it was empty, just decades of neglect and cobwebs. Then, at the far end, I found something chilling. A child's shoebox. Inside, torn pieces of photographs. Marta, in a younger version of our kitchen. My father beside her. Another of her holding a baby me. And another. Marta standing outside the house, but in the background, my mother, staring from a window with something cold in her eyes. There were notes, too. Crumpled receipts. A hospital ID badge. Marta's name, but with someone else's photograph. And finally, a slip of paper. For words, scribbled hastily. She knows. Be careful. I backed out of the crawl space, heart racing. Something had happened in this house. Years ago. And Marta had been covering for someone. Or protecting me. When I got back to my room, I couldn't sit still. I stared at the shoebox on the bed, wondering if what I'd found was just the edge of something deeper. I decided to open one of the sealed letters from the hidden box.
Just one.
My hands trembled as I slid the paper out and unfolded it. Claire, if you're reading this, something has happened. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe they told you I left. But that's not the truth. I stayed for you, even when I should have left long ago. Your family, they are not what you think. And I've kept something hidden all these years. You deserve to know. But not yet. When the time comes, look behind the fireplace.
Marta.
I looked across the room at the cold, silent fireplace. And I knew the shadows in this house weren't just history. They were alive. And they were watching. I stared at the fireplace for nearly an hour. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe properly. The letter in my hand had changed everything. Marta knew. She'd been watching them. All of them. And whatever truth she was protecting had been hidden right here, in this house, waiting to be found. Behind the fireplace. I didn't even wait until morning. The firebox was empty, cold, dusty, and lined with soot from years past. The stones were solid, but when I tapped along the back, one section sounded different.
Hollow.
I crouched down and began to feel along the mortar joints. My fingers found a small gap, and when I pressed harder, the stone shifted. A panel. Inside was a small metal tin. Rusted. Sealed with a thin wire looped around a latch. I opened it with a screwdriver. Inside was a folded envelope, brittle from age. On the front, in careful script. For Claire. Only when you're alone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I unfolded the pages and began to read. You must think I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But after what I saw, I couldn't keep pretending nothing happened. I thought the truth would come out on its own. But the years passed. And your mother, she made sure everyone forgot. Or stayed quiet. You were 5 when it started. I remember hearing things, muffled arguments at night. Your father pacing the hallway. Then one night, I found something buried under the laundry sink. A torn dress. Blood on the hem. Your mother said it was a misunderstanding. But it was more than that. It was a warning. I stopped reading. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier. I could barely swallow. My mother had always been composed. Dignified. But distant. She never yelled. Never cried. Never lost control, at least not where anyone could see. But Marta had seen. That morning, I waited for my mother to leave the house for her usual yoga class before sneaking into the master bedroom. I hadn't stepped foot in their suite since I was a teenager. It was pristine, just like everything else in the house. Ivory bed linens. Matching drapes. A perfectly aligned row of perfume bottles on the vanity. But the desk in the corner, that was new. My mother never used to keep a desk in her bedroom. I walked over slowly, half expecting some kind of alarm to go off. But there it was, modern, sleek, and locked. The top drawer had a small keypad for digits. I tried my birthday. Nothing. Tried hers. Still nothing. I paused. Then typed in the one combination that still haunted this house. Marta's start date. The day she moved in.
Click.
The drawer popped open. Inside were neatly arranged file folders. Bills. Receipts. Doctor notes. And a locked leather-bound journal. Beside it, a small brass key, probably for the bottom drawer. I opened it. Inside, a single black notebook, titled in gold, Private, Property of Yes. My mother's initials. I opened to the first page. January 3rd, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Keeping up appearances is easy until the silence creeps in. Claire's asking questions again. She remembers more than she should. I told Marta to redirect her. She hesitated. That woman is getting too bold. January 15th, the pills are helping. He's calmer now. But if he ever finds out what I told Marta, what I did, I froze. The pages blurred. I flipped ahead, scanning frantic handwriting. Some entries were short, others full pages. But one stood out. April 9th, I followed Marta today. She went to the post office. I told her I'd handle Claire's mail, but she was mailing something. Letters. Dozens. Addressed to Claire's university dorm. She's been writing behind my back. I intercepted the rest later that night. Burned most of them. She won't stop until she's removed. She won't stop until she's removed. The words echoed like gunshots in my head. Marta hadn't just disappeared. She'd been silenced. I took photos of every page in the journal, heart racing the entire time. Then I put everything back the way I found it, except the key. I pocketed that. I didn't trust leaving it in the house. That night at dinner, I watched my mother closely. She was calm, precise, pouring wine and asking about my day of rest. My father sat at the head of the table, looking detached, like always. But I noticed the way he flinched when I mentioned Marta's room. She kept a lot of things, I said casually. Photos. Notes. She was sentimental, my mother said smoothly. She also wrote letters, I added. To me. My father dropped his fork. Clatter. My mother's eyes didn't move. She just sipped her wine. I'm sure she meant well, she said. I think she meant to protect me. That was when her gaze finally met mine. Cold. Measured. Dangerous. Later that night, I opened a second letter from Marta's box. This one was older, postmarked when I was 16. Asterisk Claire. If you ever feel like the walls are listening, trust your instinct. This house was built on power and fear. I stayed because I thought I could shield you. But I don't know how much longer I can hold back the damage. If they find these letters before you do, they'll destroy them. Or worse, they'll make you think I was never here at all. That's what she wants. To rewrite the past in her favor. But you know the truth. You've always known. Trust what you remember. And never let her convince you it was just a dream. Marta, asterisk. My hands shook as I folded the letter. The next morning, I called the police. I told them I wanted to file an official missing persons report. Again. When they asked why, I said something had changed. I have reason to believe her disappearance wasn't voluntary, I said. The detective's tone shifted immediately. Why? I paused. Because if I said too much now, they'd come after me next. So I simply answered. Because my family has a long history of making inconvenient people disappear. The detective's visit was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I didn't tell my parents. Not because I wanted to be deceitful, but because I knew how they would react. Calm smiles, practiced charm, stonewalling wrapped in pleasantries. They were masters of the social mask. I'd spent my entire childhood studying their performances, learning how to play along. Until now. Detective Sarah Velasquez arrived in an unmarked sedan and walked up the stone steps with purpose. She was in her mid-40s, with a no-nonsense posture and eyes that missed nothing. When I opened the door, she greeted me with a polite but firm nod. Claire. Yes. Thank you for coming. She stepped inside, taking in the foyer's antique mirrors, marble flooring, and rows of curated family portraits. Her gaze lingered on one in particular, a black and white photo of my mother and Marta standing together at a garden party, decades ago. I remember this case, she said quietly. Marta Skellner. Reported missing last year. No signs of forced entry. No confirmed sightings. I nodded. And nothing followed up since. We sat in the parlor, far enough from the study that my father wouldn't overhear. I handed her the first photocopies of my mother's journal. She read in silence for several minutes. Then looked up. You found this recently? Yes. Hidden in her drawer. And there's more. Letters Marta wrote to me over the years. Dozens.
My mother intercepted them.
Destroyed some. Her jaw tightened. Have you shown this to anyone else?
No.
Just you. She nodded. Smart. What about Marta's family? She had none. Or none she spoke about. That wasn't entirely true. I didn't know if she had family, because I had never asked. After she left, with copies of the evidence and a promise to open a deeper inquiry, I felt something shift in the air, like the house had finally realized I was no longer playing by its rules. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the fireplace, about the shoebox, about what else Marta might have hidden. So, I returned to her room again. Everything was just as I left it, except the photo frame on the nightstand was missing. The one of her and me when I was 7. My heart sank. Someone had been here. I stepped toward the wardrobe to check on the letterbox, only to find the panel open. The box was still there, but someone had definitely searched it. Fingerprints. Smudges. A crease on a letter I hadn't opened yet. I grabbed the box, clutched it tight to my chest, and backed out of the room. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened another letter. Claire, you might be angry with me someday. For staying silent. For not running when I had the chance. But I want you to understand something. They needed me here. Your mother, most of all. She was unraveling. Always on the edge of something darker. She didn't know how to raise a child. Not really. I took on that role, but it meant she hated me for it. I didn't replace her. But in her mind, I did. That's when the real danger began. Watch her closely. She wears masks better than anyone I've ever known. The next morning, I confronted her. I waited until she was on the back patio, sipping tea with that same glassy calm. You went into Marta's room. Her lips didn't move, but her grip on the teacup tightened. Why would I do that? You tell me. You took the photo. You rifled through her letters. She took a long sip. You're being paranoid. I filed a new report. The detective has your journal. Silence. Then she smiled. A slow, terrifying smile.
Well.
I suppose it was only a matter of time. What does that mean? I kept you safe, Claire. You think you're uncovering secrets. But the truth? The truth is messy. Dangerous. You were a child. Marta filled your head with stories. She raised me. She brainwashed you. Her voice suddenly snapped sharp. She wanted to take you away from me. Don't you see that? She always looked at you like you were hers. Because you didn't. My mother's face hardened. I had never seen her without the mask before. But now it was slipping. She didn't leave, Claire. She was removed. For your sake. For this family's reputation. She was unstable. Obsessive. I stepped back. Did you hurt her? She didn't answer. Just stared at me with that strange, eerie calm. I protected what mattered. And you'll understand that someday. I fled to my room. My hands shook as I locked the door behind me. That evening, I packed everything, the letters, the photocopied journal, the photos, even the broken panel Marta had hidden her tin behind. I placed them all in a single file folder and labeled it Truth. Then I called Detective Velasquez. There's more, I said. I think she admitted something today. Not directly, but enough. There was a pause. Then, I'll be there tomorrow morning. Be careful until then. I barely slept. Again. At 3 a.m., I heard the creak of the floorboards outside my room.
Soft. Slow.
I froze. Shadows moved beneath the door.
No knock.
No sound. Just presence. After a minute, they faded. When I opened the door at dawn, there was a note taped to it.
No handwriting.
Just clipped letters from a magazine, ransom style. Stop digging, or you'll end up just like her. I tore it down and started writing my own letter to the press, to the authorities, to anyone who would listen. Because I wasn't the scared little girl in this house anymore. And Marta hadn't vanished in vain. The detective didn't show up. 8 a.m. came and went. Then 9. Then 10. By noon, I was pacing the length of my childhood bedroom, my phone clutched in one hand, Marta's file folder in the other. I called Velasquez's line. Straight to voicemail. Then again. Nothing. Was she ignoring me? Or had something happened? I went to the front hallway to check the security footage from the cameras I had installed a week earlier. I hadn't told anyone about them, not even my father. They were motion activated, backed up on a hidden cloud drive. The moment I opened the app, my stomach dropped. The feed was wiped. The last saved file was from 2 nights ago. Everything else was gone. That was when I heard the doorbell. My mother was in the garden. My father in the sunroom. I opened the door carefully. It wasn't the detective. It was a man in a gray suit.
Thin.
Late 40s. Polished but strange. He smiled too easily. "Miss Whitmore?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me an envelope. "You've been served." Served? He didn't wait for me to open it. Just nodded, turned, and walked off. Inside was a cease and desist letter from a private legal firm. The client? My mother. It demanded that I refrain from disseminating fabricated claims regarding the disappearance of household staff member Marta Skellner, and threatened legal retaliation for libel, defamation, and familial harassment. My hands shook. She wasn't just trying to silence me now, she was turning it into a war. I stormed into the kitchen, the letter clutched in one hand, fury boiling just beneath my skin. She was already there, stirring tea like nothing was happening. "I got your letter," I said. She didn't even blink. "Good. You're threatening me?" "I'm protecting what's left of this family," she said coldly. "You've gone too far, Claire." I held out Marta's file folder and slapped it onto the marble countertop. "This is the truth, and you can't bury it." She looked at it, then up at me. That woman was unwell. She was obsessive. She fabricated drama to feel important. And you've always been too naive to see it. She raised me, and that was her mistake. Her voice was ice. Controlled.
Calculated. I sett här.
"Did you kill her?" She didn't answer. Didn't flinch. Just said, "Some people get erased because they won't stop digging graves for themselves." I backed out of the kitchen, heart hammering. I couldn't be here anymore. I needed air.
Space.
Distance. I left the house without another word and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. By late afternoon, I found myself parked in front of a nursing home where Marta had visited once a month, alone, during the last year she was seen. It was a place I hadn't thought of in years. When I asked the front desk if they remembered her, the receptionist tilted her head. She used to visit a man here, Edgar Mallory. She was listed as his niece.
Edgar.
I asked to see him. He was in room 214, thin, frail, and barely lucid. But when I mentioned Marta's name, he blinked and slowly began to smile. "Little Marta," he whispered, "always brought peppermint cookies." "Did she ever say anything about my family?" His eyes flickered. "She was scared. Said someone was following her."
"Who?"
He shook his head. "She wouldn't say. But she wrote it down. Said she was mailing it. Said if anything happened to her, her girl would know." I knew then there was another letter. A final one. But I'd never received it. Because someone made sure I didn't. Back at the house, the energy had shifted. My father was in the library, hunched over a chessboard, staring at it as if waiting for a move that would never come. I walked in and closed the door behind me. "I need to ask you something," I said. He didn't look up. "Did you know what she was doing to Marta?" His hand twitched, hovering over the night. "Claire, she kept secrets. I know that. But I need to know if you helped her keep them." He looked up slowly, eyes glassy and distant. "She told me Marta was becoming unstable. That she might hurt you. She said the best thing was to send her somewhere."
Quietly.
I believed her. God help me, I believed her. "Where did she send her?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I swear. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know." Cowardice. That was his mask. And it cost a woman her life. That night, I tried calling the detective again. Still no answer. Then, at 11:43 p.m., I got a message from an unknown number. "You're not safe here anymore. SV." I stared at the initials. "Sarah Velasquez?" I called back immediately. Straight to voicemail. A second message came in. "Your mother's lawyer filed a motion to declare you mentally unfit. She wants power of attorney." I froze. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. She wasn't just trying to silence me. She was trying to have me committed. Just like Marta warned. I grabbed my go bag, packed days ago, and fled the house that night. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a note. Didn't turn back. Because this time I believed Marta. And I finally understood what she had sacrificed to keep me safe. I didn't sleep. Not in the motel room I paid for in cash. Not with the lights off. Not even for a minute. Every creak in the walls. Every hum of a car outside. Every flicker of shadow made me bolt upright, breath shallow and heart racing. My mother's voice haunted me now, calm, measured, unbothered, as if she had planned all of this long before I ever came home. By morning I had a plan. Velasquez hadn't answered, but her warning was clear enough. I couldn't trust the system anymore, not the legal one, not the medical one, and certainly not the one my mother had manipulated for decades. But I still had the truth. And the truth, once documented, has a strange kind of power. I uploaded everything. Marta's letters, the journal pages, photos of the fireplace panel, scans of the cease and desist order, even the letter I found taped to my bedroom door, all into a shared cloud folder I titled the Marta Archive. And I sent the link to 4 people. My former college roommate, now a journalist, a human rights attorney I once met during an internship, Detective Velasquez's official precinct email, and a burner Reddit account I'd quietly used for years under a pseudonym. If I vanished next, I wanted the story to survive me. But stories, as Marta once wrote, don't just survive, they scream to be finished. And I wasn't done yet. I drove to the place I had avoided for years, the family's private estate outside town. Technically, it belonged to my late grandfather, but it had been in legal limbo since his death. No one lived there anymore. Just a caretaker, probably paid in silence and off-the-books cash. The place was enormous. 3 floors. Thick woods. A forgotten well. A servant's cottage on the edge of the property. Long abandoned. I parked behind the tree line and entered through the rear fence. As I approached the servant's cottage, a familiar feeling sank into my chest. The same dread I felt as a child. I'd always hated this place.
But now I knew why.
Marta had taken me here once, when I was 8.
Just for a walk, she said.
But we never went inside. She stared at it for a long time, then turned around without saying a word. Back then, I thought she was scared of the dark. Now I realized she was remembering something. The cottage smelled like rot and mildew. Water damage bloomed along the ceiling. Wallpaper peeled in corners. I stepped into the parlor and froze. The floorboards creaked in a strange way, hollow. I walked slowly, tapping my shoe along the floor. There, under the warped rug. I pulled it back and revealed an old cellar door. No lock, just a rusted handle. I hesitated, then opened it. The staircase creaked with every step as I descended into the dark. My flashlight caught glints of metal, tools, shelves, paint cans. And then in the corner a trunk. An old steamer chest, half covered in burlap. I opened it, bracing myself. Inside were papers. A child's toy. A yellowed photograph. Marta and me, younger than I remembered, standing beside the same chest. I rifled through the contents until I found a sealed envelope, marked with my name. Claire. If you're reading this, I've already lost. But you haven't. Everything they did, the silencing, the lies, the manipulation, it wasn't about me. It was about you. You weren't supposed to inherit the worst of this family. That was the plan. Your father knew. That's why he turned away. But your mother, she wanted legacy, obedience, control. And I was the threat who remembered too much. There's more buried here. In this house. Underneath. If you have the strength, dig. My hands trembled. I scanned the floor. Concrete. But a narrow crack snaked along the rear wall. I ran my hand along it until I found a loose brick. It fell away. Behind it dirt, fresh enough to smell. I dropped to my knees and began pulling at the soil with my bare hands. 5 minutes in, I hit something solid.
Wood.
The discovery made the evening news. Police found skeletal remains in a shallow grave beneath the servant's cottage floor. Forensics would take time, but I already knew the truth. It was Marta. She'd never left. She'd been buried. Silenced so completely that only her final letters had lived on. The press swarmed. Within hours of the tip-off I sent, 6 local reporters had their headlines. Missing housekeeper's body found on Whitmore Estate. Family heiress breaks silence after grim discovery. I wasn't trying to be a hero, but I had promised Marta something, without ever saying the words. That I wouldn't forget her. That I wouldn't let her disappear. They arrested my mother the next morning. It was surreal, watching her led out of the house in handcuffs. Still composed. Still calm. Still wearing pearls.
She didn't shout.
She didn't cry. She simply looked at me as they guided her into the back seat of the cruiser, as if to say, "You ruined everything." And I did. Because the truth has claws. And it finally tore through the mask she wore so well. The courtroom was packed. Not just with reporters and legal teams, but with ghosts, ones I couldn't see but felt everywhere. Marta sat in the back row in my mind, hands folded in her lap, her quiet dignity intact even in death. My mother sat across from me, surrounded by her defense team, her posture upright, her hair immaculate. You would know she was being charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. You'd think she was attending a charity luncheon. The trial began 2 weeks after her arrest. The judge approved an expedited schedule due to the public scrutiny and the overwhelming evidence, though overwhelming, was still a matter of perspective. There was no surveillance footage. No confession. No DNA. Just bones, documents, and the fragmented testimony of a daughter no one knew whether to pity or suspect. The prosecution leaned heavily on the hidden letters, the forensic match to Marta's handwriting, the photograph of me and Marta beside the steamer chest. They played the 911 call from the anonymous tip, my voice, disguised but cracking. They showed the floor plans of the estate, and how only someone who knew it intimately could have hidden Marta's body without detection. They called character witnesses, former house staff, a neighbor who once heard screaming late at night, a nurse who remembered bruises on Marta's arms but had been told not to interfere. Then came the defense. And they went for blood. She has a history of emotional instability, said their lead attorney. Clara's long suffered from attention-seeking behaviors. She believes a woman who left decades ago is her real mother. None of the evidence ties Mrs. Whitmore directly to the crime. No fingerprints. No murder weapon. No cause of death. This is a witch hunt, orchestrated by a bitter, disturbed woman. I sat there, fists clenched, biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. The worst moment came on day 7. They played a clip of me, aged 19, drunk and screaming on a college lawn. It had nothing to do with Marta. Nothing to do with my mother. But it painted me as unstable. Exactly the way Marta had warned me she'd do. I broke down that night, in the motel bathroom, curled on the tile, sobbing into my coat. I wanted to stop. To run. To disappear like Marta did. Only willingly this time. But then, a small voice pulled me back.
Noah.
My son had been staying with a family friend during the trial. I couldn't risk dragging him into the circus. But he called that night. Mommy, are you winning? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Not yet, baby. But I'm trying really hard. You'll win. You always do. And just like that, I stood up. Because I hadn't come this far to lose in the final inning. The turning point came on day 10. Detective Velasquez finally took the stand. She confirmed the messages I'd received. She testified that shortly before Marta's disappearance, she had submitted an informal complaint, anonymously, alleging abuse by an employer. The description fit the Whitmores. But without a name or date, it had been buried. Until now. Then she pulled out something else, something no one had seen yet. A witness statement. From a former estate caretaker. He hadn't come forward at first, but after the media storm, he'd reached out. He remembered being instructed by Mrs. Whitmore herself to seal off the servants' cottage and never enter the basement. He said he was paid handsomely to keep quiet. The courtroom went still. Even my mother's lips tightened. Closing arguments were brutal. The prosecution called her a master manipulator with a porcelain smile and a heart of ice. The defense painted me as a desperate daughter creating monsters from shadows. But the jury saw through it. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict came in.
Guilty.
Of conspiracy. Of obstruction. But not of murder. Not enough evidence, they said. It was a bittersweet win. She wouldn't spend life behind bars. Just 15 years, with parole eligibility after 8. But she would be remembered not as a socialite or philanthropist, She'd be remembered as the woman who buried the help and nearly erased her own child. After the trial, I sat on the courthouse steps. The reporters had all rushed off. The crowd had thinned. And for the first time in months, I felt weightless. Like I could finally breathe without checking over my shoulder. I went to the cemetery that night. I brought no flowers. Just Marta's final letter. I read it aloud. Every word. And then I folded it, kissed it, and buried it under the headstone marked, Marta Skellner, a life they couldn't bury. Because the trial was over. But the truth had just begun to bloom. The house sat in silence. Not the empty silence of absence, but the warm hush of peace after a storm has passed. Dust settled in places that once trembled with secrets. Light poured in through the windows, unfiltered, unhindered. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch when I walked through the front door. The Whitmore estate was mine now. Legally.
Publicly.
Spiritually. And I wasn't keeping it. The first thing I did was strip the study. Every award, every oil painting of my mother in various philanthropic poses, every record book meticulously curated to reflect prestige and polish, I tossed them into boxes. I donated the wine collection, shredded the guest logs, burned the journals she'd weaponized as character references in the trial. I kept only one item, Marta's last photograph. Her eyes told more truth than all my mother's documents ever did. The next week, I started the process to have the servants' cottage converted into a memorial library. It would house the stories of domestic workers like Marta, those erased, silenced, broken, or buried by the families they served. I named it the Skellner Foundation for Silenced Women. The paperwork took time, but donations came quickly. Because now that my mother's mask had cracked wide open, the whispers turned into floodlights. Other women spoke up. Former staff, former acquaintances. Some feared retaliation. Others just wanted closure. And they all said the same thing. She made you feel like you owed her for breathing. Noah and I moved into a modest craftsman bungalow outside the city. Red shutters. Oak trees. A backyard swing set. He slept through the night again. No more nightmares. No more questions about why Grandma doesn't visit anymore. He was too young to understand the depth of it all. But one night, after dinner, he asked something I wasn't expecting. "Mommy, are you sad about Grandma being gone?" I paused. Then I said, "I'm sad about what she chose. But I'm not sad she's not here." He nodded, thought about it, then asked, "Are you happy now?" I smiled. "I'm safe now." He grinned and ran off to draw a dragon on the wall with a crayon. I didn't stop him. The nightmares still came sometimes. But they changed shape. Instead of my mother's voice whispering through the walls, I heard Marta humming in the kitchen. Instead of falling into the cellar, I was standing in the sunroom, surrounded by light, watching my son build towers out of blocks. Healing wasn't a straight line. It curved and backtracked and sometimes disappeared altogether. But every day I woke up, I reclaimed something my mother tried to take. Velasquez retired 6 months after the trial. She sent me a postcard from the mountains. It said, "Truth has long legs. You gave it a marathon."
Eshfe.
We never spoke again. But she had done her part. Just like Marta had. Just like I had. The press moved on eventually. New scandals. New crimes. New tragedies to consume the spotlight. But the Whitmore name never quite recovered. She'd built it like a palace. Cold, gleaming, invulnerable. And in the end, it crumbled under the weight of one forgotten woman. On the 1-year anniversary of the trial, I held a small dedication ceremony at the Memorial Library. Former staff came. So did neighbors who once turned the other way. And a few strangers who had simply heard Marta's story online and wanted to pay their respects. I read her letter aloud. The one she wrote to me from the trunk, the one that started it all. And then I said, Marta Skellner was not just a housekeeper. She was not just an immigrant or a woman without power. She was a protector, a historian, a mother in all but name. And she was silenced by people who called themselves family. But today and every day after, she is remembered not for how she died, but for how she loved. As people placed flowers around her memorial stone, I felt a breeze move through the trees. Not cold, not ominous, just peaceful, like someone finally exhaled. That night, I tucked Noah into bed and found one of his drawings on the nightstand. It was me, him, and Marta, all three of us smiling under a bright yellow sun. I held it to my chest and cried, not for what was lost, but for what I still had. A name no longer weighted by shame. A story no longer chained by silence. A future I could finally choose.